beautiful Morgantown, West Virginia, known as one of the best college towns in America, and a friendly family place. But it's home to a brutal murder case of Skylar Neese. Skylar Neese was a 16-year-old girl. She was a thriving, lively, and friendly girl. She also never missed a day of work at her part-time job at a local Wendy's. Skylar was the only child of parents David and Mary. Spoiled rotten according to her dad. One of the most memorable moments, he says, was when she was a little girl. She hosted a tea party with her dad, and the little plastic teacups actually had water in them. Without a question, David drank the water and started to compliment how good the tea was. Skylar was just so happy that he actually liked her tea. But later that night, when Mary got home from work and asked David how the day went, David told her about the tea party and how the teacups actually had water in them. Mary, confused, stopped David and told him, "David, Skylar is not tall enough to reach the faucet. How can she have put water in the cups?" Then they found out that Skylar was getting the water from the toilet. Everyone who knew her thought she was a bubbly girl and a loyal friend. Fast forward July 5, 2012. Skylar, 16 at the time, just finished a night shift at Wendy's. She gets home and tells her parents she is really tired. She wants to go to bed. She hugs both of her parents and goes to her room and closes the door behind her. The following morning, David and Mary have to go to work early in the morning. Skylar's bedroom door was still closed, so David and Mary assumed that Skylar was still sleeping. So they continued to get ready for work, and when it was time to go, they decided to not bother Skylar and let her sleep in. Later that day, David got home from work and the apartment was quiet, so he yells out, "Hi Sky, I'm home," but there's no response. He thought to himself, Skylar should be awake by now. It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So he walks to her bedroom, and he noticed that Skylar's bedroom door was still closed. Skylar's bedroom's door is only shut when she's sleeping. But it is really late in the afternoon. He knocks on her door to see if she's okay. But Skylar doesn't respond, so he knocks again. This time he shouts, "Sky, are you okay?" Once again, no response, so he puts his ear against the door, but there is no noise coming from her room. He knocks and shouts a few more times, but he gets no response. That's when he opens the door and sees that Skylar is not in the bedroom. At this time, David can't think of where Skylar is, so he calls Skylar. But he gets no answer, so he calls Mary at work and asks her if she knows where Skylar was, or if she had seen her. Mary said no and just told him that she had probably gone out with her friends. When they hung up the phone, David calls one of Skylar's closest friends. Her name was Sheila Ray. Sheila and Skylar became friends when they were in 2nd grade. So David and Mary had a pretty good relationship with her, so he calls her and asks if she knows where Skylar is. Sheila would say, "Sorry, I don't know where she is, but I did talk to her last night, and there was nothing unusual." David said, "Okay, but if you get in touch with you, tell her to call us, or if you know anything about her, just let me know." He hangs up with Sheila and started to look around Skylar's room to see if there is any clues to where Skylar can be. And at first nothing seems out of the ordinary, but when he walked around her bed and looked at her closet, he saw the mesh screen that belonged to her bedroom window. Now he thinks, why is the mesh screen in her closet and not mounted on her window? He then proceeds to walk over to the window where the screen is supposed to be, and when he looks down at the bottom of the window, he sees that the window is a little bit open, just enough where you can get your finger underneath and open it. Dave opens the window all the way up and proceeded to stick his head out of the window and started to look around for some explanation to why the screen was in her closet, and he got an explanation. When he looked straight down to the ground, he saw several feet down this window there was a bench, and the bench was clearly moved there recently. For David it was unusual because he never had heard of his daughter sneaking out before, so David started to process what was going on, when it dawned on him that his daughter had snuck out but never got back home. He calls Mary. They both are concerned that Skylar is not home yet, but they figured out that if she did sneak out, to just give her a few more hours to turn up again. And so they wait, but 4 p.m. comes around and still nothing. Skylar was supposed to work that day, but when Skylar didn't show up, Wendy's called David and told him that Skylar didn't show up for work that day. That's when David and Mary knew something was wrong, so they called 911.
County 911, do you have an emergency?
I have a 16-year-old daughter who apparently snuck out of her room last night. She has not been home, hasn't went to work, can't get a hold of her from any of her friends. I am scared to death.
Has she done this before?
No.
David and Mary start to freak out and saying to each other, should we go out and look for her with the police, or should we stay in case she comes back? At this point, Mary's phone rings, and it's Sheila. Mary immediately answers the phone, hoping Sheila has good news about Skylar, but she asks Mary right away if Skylar has come home yet. Mary tells Sheila that no, she hasn't come home yet, that they just got off the phone with the police because something must have been wrong. When Sheila heard that the police was involved, she took a deep breath and explained to Mary that the night before Skylar had snuck out of the house, and so had she, along with other close childhood friend named Rachel Schoaf. The three girls were best friends and inseparable. Sheila admits that all three snuck out, and that it wasn't unusual for them. They actually used to do it all the time, that they would drive around and smoke marijuana. But what concerned Mary and David more was that when they snuck out of their houses to smoke together, they would make sure they never drove their car directly in front of each other's house, because they were concerned someone will see them or hear them. So what they did was that once they got out of the house, they would walk a block or two away from their house, and they will call the other two and then get picked up. And when they would dropped off, they will get dropped off a block or two away from their home and walk the rest of the way. And Sheila said that last night, like several other nights, Sheila and Rachel dropped Skylar off a block or two away from her house. When Mary heard that, she got so worried that Skylar had been abducted during this walk, especially because the streets were not well lit. It was dark. She is potentially high on marijuana. She then hangs up the phone and updated the police of what Sheila had told her. Mary and David started looking around and knocking on doors around their apartment to see if there was any sign or if anyone has seen Skylar, but there was no sign and nobody saw anything. At this moment, Mary and David are feeling defeated, and at that moment Mary remembers that there is a security camera on the outside of the apartments that is looking down at the road. David and Mary run to find the security guard to explain what's going on, and security guard pulls out the footage from the night before. But once they see the footage, it just doesn't make sense. Sheila had said that they picked Skylar a block or two away from the apartment, but the footage shows Skylar getting in a car. Even though this didn't solve the mystery of where Skylar have gone, David and Mary were a little relief, because no matter who it was, Skylar got in the car willingly. Even though the police had the footage, it really didn't give them any clues of whose car it was, because the footage was just so grainy. But the police was telling David and Mary that Skylar was sure to show up any day now. As much as they didn't want to believe it, Skylar is capable of running away. It is very common for teens to run away, and they usually show up in a couple of days. So a couple of days go by and nothing. A couple of weeks go by and still nothing. A couple of months go by and still no news about Skylar. Despite the fact that there is a massive police search going on, and Morgantown is flooded with missing flyers of Skylar. And despite that it has gotten massive publicity, no one has heard nothing about Skylar. It was like Skylar just disappeared, no sign of her, and no one had a clue of what happened to her. David and Mary were devastated that they still have no idea of what happened to Skylar. They were still holding on to the idea of her running away, and maybe she would eventually get in touch with them. 6 months after Skylar went missing, the case started to go cold. But in December 12th, Rachel, one of the friends that had been there with Sheila and Skylar, on the night Skylar went missing, Rachel had a full-blown nervous breakdown. It was so bad that her mom had to call the police on her.
I have an issue with a 16-year-old daughter of mine. I can't control her anymore. She's screaming. She's running through the neighborhood. Give me the phone. No, this is over. This is over. Hurry up. Get away from her. Oh, God. She just gave me a block. Oh, God. Hurry up, please.
Police took Rachel to a psychiatric hospital, and when she got out a few days later, she went straight to the Morgantown Police Department and said there was Something about Skylar disappearance. This secret, whatever it was just too much for her to handle. It was literally driving her crazy. On Jan. 3, 2013, Rachel confessed to her attorney and police that she and Sheila stabbed Skylar to death. She also said that her and Sheila had been planning on killing Skylar, and they even had discussed how to dispose of the body. They even made a kill kit that included shovel, paper towels, bleach, extra pair of clothes, and kitchen knife. When they pick up Skylar, Sheila and Rachel already have everything planned out. They drive all the way from Star City past Blackville and across state line to Pennsylvania to the woods in town called Brave, where Skylar unfortunately would never come out of. The girls find a grassy area to sit and smoke marijuana. That's when Skylar gets up and heads to the car to get a lighter when her back was facing Sheila and Rachel, and it was time. 1, 2, 3. They started to stabbing Skylar. Skylar runs, but Rachel tackles her to the ground. And that's when Sheila and Rachel continue to repeatedly stab Skylar to her death. They planned to burying Skylar's body, but the ground was too hard, so instead they dragged Skylar's body to the side of the road and began to cover her body with branches, rocks, and leaves. The car that Skylar was seen getting into was determined to be Sheila. After Rachel's confessions, she agreed to lead police to the site of the murder to try to find Skylar's body. With the discovery of Skylar's body and the blood found on Sheila's car that belonged to Skylar, police had enough evidence to arrest Sheila and Rachel. When they asked Rachel why they killed Skylar, her answer was simple: we just didn't like her. Rachel Shove turned herself into authorities at the Monongalia County Circuit Court on May 1, 2013. She is charged as an adult. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and she faces 30 years in prison. Sheila was arrested in a restaurant parking lot. She was charged as an adult, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced as an adult to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 15 years. If you have a creepy, scary experience you would like to share, you mail it at theunexploredandundiscovered@gmail.com.
Through the tulips with